Good morning. Welcome to SJU. Hello, friends. It's so beautiful to see you guys today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience. I will be 100% transparent as Roth, Cornet, me. It's my fault. It is not Eric Goldman's fault, who was here on time. But thank you for your patience. Thank you for waiting for us. We're going to talk about the new Netflix movie, The Old Guard. And as a fun surprise later in the show, we're also going to talk about the comedy Palm Springs, which is going to debut on Hulu this weekend. So there's some fun movies coming out. There's actually a number of really good movies coming out this weekend, Eric, and I am delighted to hear about it and also to know about it and to tell you about it. Eric, Old Guard, first of all, please tell us a little synopsis of the film and your first impressions.
So the synopsis would be basically that this squad of kind of badass mercenaries, like I guess, they're sort of but
Robin Hood mercenaries.
Good mercenaries, the good kind. They go around the world, they do missions, but the big hook is that they're immortals. Charlize Theron is their leader. And they have been around for centuries. We kind of learn a little bit about who might have joined when. And then the film is about them getting a new recruit, about someone kind of becoming like them and joining up with their pack and what happens after that. And it's a fun movie.
It's a really fun movie, and here's what I'll say about it. The performances in this movie, I think, are what help it. Well, there's a couple of things. There's what feels like real stakes in the movie. There's a great relationship work done in this movie. These are really, really, really good actors.
Yeah.
In the film, you're talking about our antagonist is a complex antagonist, and in a real way, a complex antagonist in one of them, Chiwetel Ejiofor. We have
Dudley Dursley is another one.
Yes, exactly. Kiki Lane is showing up. She was in If Beale Street Could Talk, if you guys remember that film. It's really great. And she's like the new recruit. And we have Charlize Theron at the center, who I think is really embracing her action chops. In the last couple of years, had clearly done some training with Atomic Blonde, and as a friend of mine and I were saying, the choreography in this film is really great, and you can see that she's doing a lot of the work herself. You can see that this is a team of people that have worked together for a really, really long time. They have a shorthand both verbally and also physically as fighters and warriors. We've seen the idea of the Eternal Warrior before, but I do think that this is a fun new spin on it, and there's a mythology there that isn't so deeply explored that it runs its welcome out in this film, but is deeply explored enough, frankly, to leave me wanting more. It's very frothy and silly, some of it. Some of it's pretty dark and terrifying. But I wanted more, and I will say it set me up for that, damn it. And it felt like a pilot in that respect. Like, it didn't even set me up for another movie. It set me up for 10 episodes, Eric.
I saw you mentioned that to me the other day, and I got what I didn't think when I watched it. I mean, look, it is blatantly set up for sequels. Like, it is very much not only sequels, but there's also like backstory we get that, like, but there's more to learn there, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of setup there. But yes, you could just as easily see this turning into a series versus like movie sequels, although movie sequels, I think, is what they're aiming at. It is silly in all the right ways, I think. Like, this is a movie where Charlize Theron is walking around with a gun and a sword, and she's an immortal, and she's awesome. And if you can embrace it, and why wouldn't you embrace what I just described? This is a really cool movie. The director is Gina Price Bythewood, and she did like Love and Basketball and Secret Life of Bees. She also directed the Cloak and Dagger pilot, which I actually thought was a really well done pilot, and kind of it had a lot of atmosphere to it in a way that some of those superhero pilots don't. And I think she does a great job here because, it is silly, but in that like kind of fun, again, comic booky, dare I say, and it's based on a comic book. We'll talk a little bit more about that way, and it embraces it, but it's not, I don't think it's campy. It's having fun with what they're doing. And it is a likable group of characters with great cast that really kind of gives it credibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it knows the movie that it is, right? Yes. In all of the best ways. And it's a tough balance to strike, because another character that Charlize played in the Fast and the Furious, I felt did not strike the balance correctly at all. Yeah. It was like she and Vin were in one movie and you were in the Fast and the Furious.
Right.
But this definitely, I think, utilizes the fact that she has great actors in the correct way, but she still understands that she's telling a big bombastic story. I mean, she's basically Jason Bourne if Jason Bourne was like a Greek myth.
Yeah,
you know?
and there's also some John Wickiness to her
Yeah.
when she's fighting. Yeah.
And by the way, I will say I was delighted to see that she had directed it because I'm a huge fan of her other movies, which are very, very much not action films. They are character-based films, which I think lends itself ultimately to what she's doing in this movie because they are wish fulfillment movies to some degree as well. And this is a wish fulfillment movie because it's looking at the dark side of immortality for sure and the challenges of immortality, but not in such a way that it becomes a slog for us, the audience. More in the way that's like, I mean, maybe you don't want to live forever, maybe this desire to constantly extend life is a little bananas.
Yeah. It's funny because the director, Gina Price Bythewood, she is not, like you said, she did mostly sort of character dramas. She did the Cloak and Dagger pilot, which obviously is based on a superhero comic book, but wasn't like action heavy. But then she was supposed to do Silver and Black, which was the Black Cat, Silver Sable Spider-Man spinoff movie. It didn't come together, but it's like she's been sort of aiming towards this for a while, this kind of like going all out action film. And yeah, like you mentioned, the fight choreography, it's excellent. And obviously, she's working with great people here, but the way she shoots it, the energy to it, I was really impressed. I've seen some other people mention this. I wish I could give credit, who I just saw specifically say this on Twitter, but it's like, we're not getting, obviously theatrical summer action movies. I mean, right now, Warner Brothers keeps saying we're getting Tenet. We'll see. But it's like this is delivering, kind of like filling that void this summer of like, oh yeah, this is a popcorn movie in the right way. This is let's sit back and watch, Charlize Theron kick some ass, and it's really legitimately fun action scenes with a lot of like, ooh, that was cool. Like I want to see that moment again kind of moments.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with you. It is a popcorn movie. I mean, we're not trying to, this isn't going to be nominated for Oscars, and that's okay. It is what it is. And I think that's one of the movie's greatest strengths is like, she's so clear. Gina is so clear about the movie that she is making, and it's so well done in every aspect of that. So I think it's got some surprises, perhaps. There's elements to immortality that aren't exactly what you think that also give us a little more as an audience to consider and worry about. It raises the stakes, but not in such a way that it becomes a slog or difficult, or frankly, that you don't get those sort of tropes that you want to see fulfilled in certain genres fulfilled by the end. My only gripe, once again, is that it effectively left me wanting more.
Yes.
And I don't know that I'm going to, with this one particular story that's kind of, I wouldn't even say it's a B story. It's really just kind of a C story lurking in the background underneath, that you can tell where it's going. And you can tell that this character is going to be important, though she's minimally in the film. And all I get is the tease.
Yes. There is a mid-credit scene, guys. I will say, this movie was written by Greg Rucka, adapting his own comic. Now, it's funny, I'm actually a big fan of Greg Rucka's comics, and he's written pretty much like almost every major superhero, but he did a lot of Batman, a lot of Daredevil, kind of worked in sort of a lot of kind of crimey superhero fun stuff. I did not read The Old Guard, which is his own comic that he adapted here, but watching this, I was like, it made sense to me that it was him, because he is one of those writers who does that fine line very well of, yes, you're dealing in tropes, you're dealing in like sort of familiar ideas, but making it feel like, you're having fun, you're winking without crossing that line into self, parody or camp. You're bringing people along for the ride in the right way. And the world building here is well done, while it is mixed with very much like origin story. And like you said, Roth, like very much like we are setting up something more, maybe crossing a slight line into feeling like a bit incomplete. It's such a weird thing, right? Like you want to leave people, if you're doing a kind of movie like this, you want to leave them wanting more, but you also want to feel like you don't want to be what was the Jeremy Renner Bourne movie, Bourne Legacy, that just felt like it just ended because it was time to end and the story was not complete at all.
Yeah.
I don't think this is that, but it certainly is like we have a lot in play. Like we want you to want more because we want to make more. But the good news is I would like to see more. I would be up for seeing these characters and these people. And I also want to mention Kiki Lane a little more because I loved If Beale Street. I'm forgetting the second part of that title.
Could talk, yeah.
Could talk. I want to say could cry. She is excellent in that movie, and it was cool to see her, as kind of a up and coming actor, make this next step to something a lot more high profile. And of course, you have actors who I wouldn't want her to just do action stuff, but it was cool to see her get to stretch and show she can do that alongside Charlize Theron, who is such a master at going back and forth between like serious drama and cool action, and then movies that kind of mix it all. So it was cool to see them. I thought they made a good duo, a good sort of mentor or trainee duo.
100%. And I will say this, I think you're right, Eric. It doesn't tread the line, which I think a number of franchise films have been guilty of, quite frankly, of setting something up and almost not maybe with a little too much hubris in some cases, assuming that they're going to be able to fulfill the promise that they've made at the end of a certain movie, and they're not.
Yes.
In some cases. So
like Green Lantern, we can name so many movies that were like, here's our big setup.
Right. We can name a few movies, but I do think that this is a complete enough story in terms of Charlize's arc and Kiki Lane's arc throughout that.
A couple other characters.
And a couple of other characters as well. That it does feel like a complete story and a complete film. It does not feel like it's tricking me in any regard. Yeah. I just think that this world, which I really enjoyed, is right for a series. And even more than just a couple of movies, which we don't know how many or if we're getting any more. It really feels like a world in which I would like to spend more time here. I would like to spend 10 hours of time here on Netflix this weekend, but I cannot. I can only get the 2 that you've provided me, and that's okay. But maybe I'm just spoiled by the way we consume things these days as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, by the way, God, you kind of reminded me that this is a Netflix movie because Netflix is interesting in that they have money to burn, it seems, and they make deals with every single person. But most Netflix movies, my perception is, even though they have huge stars in them, a lot of times it feels like this isn't like the biggest deal for these stars. Like, yes, you got Brad Pitt, you got Sandra Bullock, but these feel like lesser projects for them or not their top of the line projects. And but of course there are exceptions, by the way. Netflix, obviously, when they make like a Roma or Irishman, like these are big prestige movies. But this movie, I was like, oh, this feels like they can deliver more of kind of what I would like, which is just sort of like, hey, this is mainstream entertainment. We got a big star here, and this is a movie if theaters were a thing right now, and Netflix movies played in more theaters that I would pay to go see. Like I was like, yeah, this is a fun Friday night movie to check out. And it's not aspiring to be heady art and doesn't need to be, but sometimes Netflix movies feel especially disposable to me. And this one does not. This is like a fun, cool one I will revisit and want to show people and be like, hey, check out this cool Charlize Theron action movie.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I have to imagine if we weren't in the middle of the pandemic, they would have done a limited theatrical release. Yeah. And I think that Netflix has been pointedly looking at finding the balance with those things. That being said, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and there's a number of films that the studios can't afford to release in theaters that are the summer blockbuster movies that we would be normally seeing at this time, that are escapist fare. And I think a lot of us are craving that right now because of the reasons that we are all craving that right now. And so it's nice and convenient that Netflix had this, in the holster and was able to release it. And they don't have the burden of they're actually going to become financially insolvent by having released this on the very platform that it was made for. So I recommend that you see it this weekend. I think it's a fun movie. I think if you need a little bit of escapism, this is a good one to keep you going for now. I would say, Ryan, I'm going to check in with you and see if there are any thoughts or comments from the the folks here joining us today in the comments. But first, I'm going to thank you so much for your patronage and remind you to please subscribe to our channel for videos every day. Hit that like and bell for us. It's what keeps us going, as well as your affection, which we have an equal amount of affection for you. And remind you that this is all in support of both Direct Relief and Black Lives Matter. And there are links in the description below for how you can support. And now we are going to talk to you about Hulu's Palm Springs, which is another really fun movie coming out this weekend that I actually think this one I may actually truly rewatch this weekend because that's how much I liked it. Eric, can you set us up?
Yes. First, I'm going to say I'm also going to rewatch it this weekend. Palm Springs is a time loop movie. It's interesting. Time loops have become almost like a go-to conceit. But it is Andy Samberg, and then I'm always afraid I'm going to massacre her last name, even though I adore her. Milioti. Kristen Milioti are these two people who are, I almost don't want to say too much, but it's a romantic comedy time loop movie, which is, of course, they're reliving the same day over and over again. That they didn't know each other. They were both at the same wedding. It was her sister getting married, and they're both existing. It's not a single character movie. Time loop. They're both aware that this is happening over and over again. And yes, this conceit now has been used several times and recently several times, but I think this movie gets a lot out of it. And we should mention it is produced by The Lonely Island. So it's all three of them. They did not write or direct it, but they're the producers on this movie.
And what's interesting about this one is that I think it's her movie. I think he's great, and he brings what we expect him to bring to the character, and he does really, really good work here because there's something I would say a little vulnerable about this character, which is unlike a lot of the characters that he's played previously. But yeah. It is, to me, she is equally hilarious. She is afforded an equally hilarious arc and lines. She has maybe even a little bit of more emotional depth. They play with the idea of the loop here, but never over-explain it. One of the things, that conversation I was having earlier today was this idea that the time loop is, this was not made, obviously, knowing that the pandemic was going to happen. But boy, do we not feel like we're in one a little bit right now. So it's quite apropos, but not in such a way that it's a bummer to watch in any stretch of the imagination. It's totally enjoyable. It's hilarious. I think once again, there are some surprises where we would want them to be, but it's a rom-com inside of a time loop, and it fulfills the tropes of both of those things without feeling cookie cutter in any way. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier today that I really enjoy and I respect about this is that it's science saves the day, you know?
Yeah. Actually, I noticed the closing credits had, during the special thanks, had a bunch of scientists mentioned, so I thought that was cool. It's funny because I'm a huge fan, if you follow me on Twitter, you know this, a huge fan of Happy Death Day movies, and I thought Russian Doll was excellent. So it is interesting to me that it's like, wow, yeah, this, obviously, you could make a bad version of anything, but I do think the time loop conceit is one that is open to a lot of interpretations and you can have a lot of fun with. And this movie nails, it does it so well. It does not feel like, well, I've already seen a couple of things recently that did this. It has its own take on it. Andy Samberg's character, even the way he describes what's happening, is very funny. But yeah, she is great. And I was thinking about, she most people know her from she's a big stage actor, but a lot of people know her from How I Met Your Mother, of course, where she had the burden of coming in as the mother in the final season, season 9, and we're finally going to meet the title character. She better be charming. And guess what? She really was, to the point that a lot of people were like, I wish we'd seen her earlier in the show. And yeah, she is so likable in this movie. The two of them, I think, have great chemistry, and it's really funny. The first half, I think, is more like the sort of all-out comedy. The second half, there's some other aspects that come into it, and emotionally it kind of is going into some different places, all of which I think it's successful at. But I do think it's important to say, as a comedy, it's a really freaking funny one. Like, I was just laughing a lot watching it.
I was too. And even when those emotional stakes do come in, they know how to ride that line. It's a lot more depth than the Lonely Island. I like the Lonely Island a lot, but those are just out and out balls to the walls, bombastic comedies. That's what they are. This has some depth to it. It has some stakes. And there's this moment where she does this small thing, and it's so tiny. But I was dying laughing in the beginning of the movie. She has this overblown reaction to a circumstance, and it's
so funny. It's so funny. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh my God. But what's really cool about it is like, it's one of the biggest laughs in the movie. It sets you up for who she is, which is maniac in the best possible way. But then later you come to understand why she was that heightened, and it's totally justified, and it has an extreme emotional resonance, but it's never a bummer. There's things also that happen in this movie that you never understand, like time, because you would lose track of it, as we know. But you also never understand. There's certain moments where you're like, they don't know if something is real. You never know. It's never explained. And it's fine, not in such a way that's frustrating. And I think we should also mention there is another character that exists in this world with them. And what's really cool about that character is the idea of being in a circumstance that you don't like, that feels out of your control, and then somehow coming to peace with it. And finding a sense of ease in accepting your reality as it now is, which I think is another thing that isn't overplayed and doesn't need to be, but is sort of resonant for the moment that we're in.
It's funny. Both these, it's first of all, it's just great that we have these two really good movies this weekend. And of the two, I mean, I think I like Palm Springs even more, and I really like The Old Guard. But it is interesting. Both of them do a good job of taking their bigger than life fantasy hook, whether it be like living as an immortal or being stuck in a time loop, but it do a good job of being like, now, what would that really feel like, after a while? Like, what would you actually be like, your perception of the world and your mood about it, and not in like a not in a flippant way, to actually give some weight to it. And I want to mention that the writer of this movie, Palm Springs, Andy Sierra, he worked on Lodge in 49, but the director, Max Barbacow, it's his first feature. He did some shorts, he did some documentary stuff, but I was really impressed by both of them. And it's like, I love The Lonely Island. I think Pop Star is genius. But this is a different kind of comedy for them. It's still hysterical, but it's getting a little, like you said, Roth, like a little more emotional, a little more deeper. And I think they do a really good job with it. And I watched it, and my wife did not watch it with me. I go, she has to watch it, and I want to watch this again. So I think tonight, we'll be watching Palm Springs a second time.
Me too. I gotta say, I agree with you 100%. Where I liked The Old Guard, but I definitely like this one better. I really like this one a lot. I'm going to rewatch it, which is pretty rare for me. I don't do that a lot because that's how enjoyable I find it, and it's how much I need comfort right now. I want to triple down on my recommendation to you guys to watch First Cow this weekend. I'll talk about that, but first, Ryan, what are they saying in the chat?
Oh, let's see. We got some people who hadn't heard about these movies and are happy to check them out. I think that's cool. At Carrie Dabbs obviously asks, curious how it compares to Groundhog Day when it comes to the use of the time loop. That was what she asked you guys. And also Adam Hulbert asks, do you think action movies like The Five Bloods, Old Guard, and Extraction prove Netflix can deliver better blockbusters than most theatrical ones right now?
Oh, thoughts?
I feel like, well, the first question on I think the big difference from Groundhog Day, which is a great movie, just by having her be a participant too, because it's like, it's, and like you said, Roth, she's arguably, even though it does begin from his point of view, she's very much the co-lead, if not even the main lead. And so it's two people, unlike Groundhog Day. I think that makes a big difference into what's happening.
Yeah, and in terms of Netflix, I do think there is something to that. They certainly had hit their stride in the last couple of months, and that's obviously, as we've been saying, somewhat due to the circumstances where the big action set piece movies that studios would be releasing right now, they can't. So we haven't seen Black Widow, and we haven't seen Wonder Woman, and eventually, like these things, we will see them, and we'll sort of have judgments around them. I will say there is something about the theatrical experience when watching kind of a big set piece movie that you do miss when you're watching it at home. But these have done a really good job so far.
Yeah. I feel like, like I said, I think I am starting to feel like maybe Netflix is kind of turning a corner here because, and I don't know if you shared that perception, Roth, but I just kept feeling like, even with Bird Box, and as much as it got a bunch of buzz at the time, I'm like, it just didn't seem to me like a movie that, like, if it did come in theaters would have been a big deal, but I feel like Extraction, which by the way, I still haven't seen, I keep wanting to see, but a lot of people were really into that as like an action, just a kind of fun action movie. and now they've got Old Guard, and it feels like they are starting to like be like, hey, we can deliver just like, blockbuster entertainment, as it were. Big stars, high concept, that kind of movie that fills that void for people, and maybe they're starting to figure that out in a better way than they had in the past.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to tell you guys also that there are 2 other movies that are coming out this weekend. It's just turning out to be a really great weekend for movies. I will say, I talked about this earlier today, and it occurred to me recently that I often call things sort of like frothy and light, and other people will not necessarily agree that that is the apt description for them. And let me tell you what I mean by that. For me, when I think something is really, really light, I mean, it's not challenging me as a viewer that much, not to the point where it becomes not hard, but I'm asked to do something and participate in a way with the movie that I might be in some other films. And so why I'm clarifying that is like both of these movies have darker elements, but they're ultimately really, really enjoyable. And they have comforting elements. They have actors that I'm familiar with. They have story tropes that I'm familiar with. And they resolve in a way that is comfortable for me. So there are some other films that might challenge you a little bit more in a number of ways, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that they don't feel the same when you're watching them. So I'm setting all of that up to let you know that there are 2 excellent movies coming out this weekend. If you love movies, I highly suggest that you check them out and ask yourself, do I feel differently watching this movie? Why not? One of them is called First Cow, and I've talked about it a whole bunch on this show. And it's really, really, really an excellent film. I will say it is very slow paced. This is a director who is known to do slow paced movies, and this is no exception. But these 2 movies are both sort of a look at what it means to have the American dreams. And they both in their own way deconstruct what that means. First Cow does it by setting this in the time of what felt like endless possibility and the gold rush. And it very, very adeptly illustrates the idea of resources and lack of resources and how that opens or closes opportunities for you. And there is no true level playing field. And the resource in this particular case is a cow who gives milk. And the person who has the cow doesn't necessarily utilize it and certainly isn't sharing it. And these other people have a way of utilizing it where more people can benefit from this one resource. But that said, it's not heavy-handed. It's very character-driven. It's incredibly well acted. I highly recommend it. There's another film that's a very challenging film to watch because it's listed under documentary, but it's actually not. It's a film that was cast, but it was cast by real people. He was set up in a circumstance, and then it lets that circumstance play out. And the circumstance is that you're in the last night of a dive bar in Vegas, and here's this found family who belongs nowhere else but to each other. And these are lost souls in America, in an America that is changing, in a world that is changing. And these are not characters you would normally focus on. It feels like pure cinema and verite, but it's also complete deception. In that way, I find it really, really fascinating, especially what it's exploring, which is the idea of a dream versus reality. And this film is called Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets. And
this one I haven't heard of.
It's fantastic. It's a small film that came out in Sundance. It feels very much like a cinema verite documentary, pure form documentary, but it's not. It's completely staged and set up, and it has one of the best actors I've ever seen in it. And he really is an actor in New Orleans, but I think he's also partially the man that he's playing. If you could imagine, do you know like group therapy sometimes does like immersive role-playing experiences? What if everyone was doing that, but it was for 24 hours and they were drunk and they forgot they were role-playing? That's the movie.
It's funny, the other movie that I'm gonna do a weird recommendation for, in that I haven't seen it, I just really want to, and I'm excited I can, is Relic, which I hear a lot of good things about. A horror movie that I just discovered before we started filming this is on Prime. I knew you could rent it or buy it out there, but I didn't realize if you're a Prime subscriber, it's out there. So that's part of my weekend as well. Will be watching Relic. I tried to see it last weekend, it didn't work out, but I'll watch it this weekend instead.
Well, those are a lot of movies this weekend, and I think we've given you a lot of different options in terms of what are you looking for. If you're looking for sort of like to explore your love of cinema and see some really great films, there are a couple of options. If you want to just see 2 really great, fun popcorn movies, there are some options for you there too. Yeah. I'm delighted that we were able to see as many good movies this week as we were. We hope that you guys enjoy it. Before we wrap it up, Ryan, anything else from the chat?
No, I think a couple people maybe have the movies mixed up in the chat. Could you maybe just real quickly just go over which one is which real quick? Like Old Guard is the Netflix action one.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Eric, do you want to take the lead?
Yeah. Old Guard, Charlize Theron. You'll find it on Netflix. Palm Springs, Andy Samberg. You'll find it on Hulu. And then I believe that First Cow is
It's
just
VOD.
one that is not on.
VOD.
Yeah, it's VOD. And then Relic is, like I said, it's Prime, but also I believe VOD. I'm not sure about the other one you mentioned though, Roth.
So Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets, I believe is also VOD, but I'm going to check right now for us. Bloody Nose, Empty.
It's not listed on any platform yet on Just Watch, so it might not be out quite yet.
I know it is because I just reviewed it on Press Play, and they always do it when the movie is coming out. But I will find out for us. I will find out for us. But that's plenty of movies to watch in the interim.
Yeah.
And we will locate Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets.
Put it in the pinned comment. We'll put it in the pinned comment where you can find all these movies.
Yes.
I just say that there's actually a lot of good options right now. And I was so happy because, watching Old Guard and Palm Springs, I'm like, these are really good. There's like some really good stuff to watch right now.
I know. I was delighted with that as well because I miss movies, guys.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Roth.
And we will see you Monday with, some kind of thing. We'll do something. We love you.
Happy weekend.